When I went home for 3 weeks about a month and a half ago, my dad decided that we should do a bit of night fishing. I'm not a huge fan of night fishing, any sort of fishing, or my dad for that matter. Our personalities are way too similar, and if you leave us together for more than an hour, there may be blood left over by the time he and I are done playing several dozen rounds of fisticuffs between the stubborn arguing and shouting. Dad decided to take me to this river by our new house that they had just finished building. My mom and brother stayed behind as we traipsed through the dark woods. My family lives in Oregon, and the river's about 1.5 miles from mine and my family's property, over massive fallen trees and stumps that I easily trip on, not knowing the lay of the land. My dad merely scoffed at me and reminded me that the city living makes you soft. He didn't say it like that, but something along those lines, like the stereotypical cowboy out of those old Wild West films. I blamed the fact that I didn't know the area as well as he did, and it just spiraled downhill from there, and arguing broke out between us, making the peaceful night loud and chaotic. We didn't stop arguing the entire way down to the river, my father critiquing my less than Christian lifestyle, while I criticized his manner of parenting with my 20-year-old autistic brother. When we got down to the river, we finally settled down into an awkward, tense silence as we got our gear out. I knew that this fight was far from over as I sat down on a fallen stump and shivered my ass off. I had lived in a warm climate for over a year, and honestly, coming out here was probably him punishing me for even leaving the Pacific Northwest. We refused to talk to one another as our lights danced across the water, when my dad suddenly stood up, his light landing on the other side of the river. There, on the other bank stood a man staring right at us. He wore a bright orange tee and a pair of scraggly jeans, but for the most part looked pretty average, if you didn't count the machete hanging from his belt. My dad snapped at me to start packing all our stuff up, so I followed his command as my dad started shouting at the man across the river. Their conversation was mostly lost to the roar of the white-capped water, but I could see the man making agitated sweeps with his hands every time I dared to peek. Their voices grew and my fear grew with it. My father has never been one to carry protection in the woods, hence why I was born. This man was armed and possibly dangerous with that machete, and while we had the river between us, it was shallow and had plenty of places to cross, and even if it was snow runoff, I had no doubt that this man could get behind us in mere minutes. Had we wandered onto his property by mistake and not even known it? "Drop the gear and let's go," my dad snarled at me as I took one last look to see the man starting to walk into the water, his hand flitting against his weapon. My dad put a firm hand on my shoulder and led me back into the woods towards our house. My dad is an ultra-marathoner. He runs like it's going out of style, and my mostly out-of-shape self probably wouldn't have kept up if I hadn't been so terrified. I couldn't hear if the man was coming after us, my heartbeat being so loud in my ears, but I followed my dad so closely I almost ran into him several times. Finally, we found our road and made a break for my parents' house. As soon as we were through the front door, my dad had the doors locked and was keeping a vigilant watch out the windows, making sure no crazy men with machete were creeping up on our house. Finally, when we figured that there was no guys wearing orange t-shirts, we sat down and began to talk about our experience with my mom. We avoided the part where we had been arguing, but told her everything else. We went to bed without apologizing, and I honestly felt horrid. The next day, with the only gun he owned, my father and I walked back into the woods after calling the police. They said that there was a guy who did enjoy scaring people off the forest land in the area, and that we shouldn't be too concerned. Feeling a bit sheepish, we went back to the place where we had left our gear, both of us apologizing for our lackluster behavior the night before. When we returned to what we believed to be the spot, we saw that the fishing poles had been bent, and all the line had been draped from tree to tree, and the tackle box was gone. However, me and my dad didn't fight again for the rest of my trip home. I would say this happened roughly 4 years ago. Myself and 2 friends used to have LAN parties a few times each year, where we would play video games, watch movies, and eat pizza all weekend. My friend Joe lived in a cozy suburban neighborhood. His dad worked abroad in Norway, worked 3 weeks and then came home too. His mom worked night at the local hospital, and his sister usually stayed over at a friend's house when we had the LAN, so we had the whole house to ourselves. Around 10 p.m., after a few hours of gaming, my two friends head downstairs to heat up some pizza leftovers. I said I would join them shortly once I was done playing Skyrim. Suddenly the doorbell starts ringing downstairs over and over, and I get really annoyed, thinking that they were winding me up, so I ignored it. After about 20 seconds of the constant ringing, I head downstairs really annoyed, asking them what they're doing. I look out the little round window at the door and I see a man in his mid-30s with a creepy mustache, smiling and looking directly at me. I just froze. I back out and head into the kitchen where my friends are standing very still. I ask them what's going on, and Joe says that it's his neighbor Jack, who is a close friend to the family with a wife and 2 young daughters. Joe says for the last couple of months he had started taking his medications, so he was in a very fragile mood, so we should try to ignore him. The bell keeps ringing in the background, so Joe starts heading to the door to calm him down, with me and my other friend following. Joe asks what's up, and actually starts to open the door. At this point I'm getting really worried. But to my surprise, Jack blocks the door so Joe can't open it, and started yelling, "I want Joe! I want Joe!" So Joe, fearing that he might get violent, locks the door and we start freaking out, so he goes away. We head back to the kitchen talking, just keeping ourselves calm, and it's quiet for a minute. I turn around and I see Jack once again, this time on the porch with his hands on the glass, and I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever been this shocked. He started banging really hard on the glass, so we ran upstairs to look for something to defend ourselves with in case he breaks down the glass. Me and Joe were in the zombie apocalypse phase at the time, so we had a lot of homemade weapons such as nailed baseball bats, etc. I actually started dialing 112, the equivalent to 911, because I thought that this had gotten way out of hand for us, but Joe stopped me from doing so. He was afraid that the police might come and arrest the guy, which would have destroyed his career and torn his family apart. So I put the phone away, and all 3 of us with knives and baseball bats blocked the stairs. We said to each other that if he came in, we would defend ourselves if necessary. But to my relief, the banging stopped and we didn't hear from Jack again that night. When Joe's mom came home from work, we told her about it. I don't know if she talked to him the day after, but I hope she did, because that could have turned out way worse than it did. His sister might have been there all alone. I don't have anything that can prove this actually happened, such as police reports, since we chose not to call it in, so I hope you can trust me on this. The story takes place back in October of 2011. It was a Saturday morning, and I had just woken up. I did the usual routine of eating breakfast and making myself some coffee to go. I worked at a local Jack's in the northwest part of Alabama at this time, and was scheduled to work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. that day. I grabbed my keys, walked outside with my coffee, started up my car, and began my drive to work. Work is about 10 minutes away from my house, but on the way over, I have to drive through about 5 minutes of woods and go past a sketchy neighborhood. I had cleared most of the woods and was beginning to drive past the sketchy neighborhood. I looked up ahead and saw a woman who was walking her husky down the road. As I approached to pass her, she turned her head to me and just stared at me with a blank, lifeless face, and continued to do so until I went over a small hill, not too far from her, that put me out of her sight. I knew this woman, not personally, but had seen her many times for the past few months. One of my friends from middle school lived not too far from this sketchy neighborhood, and commonly saw her. He said all she would do is stare at him with that same lifeless face. My friend recalled that one time she picked up a rock and threw it at him when he approached her one day to pet her dog and introduce himself. This woman clearly had some mental issues. I arrived at work and did my normal duties of frying chicken and cleaning the dishes. After a long day, 6 p.m. finally got here. I clocked out, got in my car, and headed back in the direction of my home where I had dinner waiting for me. I turned onto the normal road that took me in the direction of the woods and sketchy neighborhood. I approached the same small hill where I had seen the lady at previously that day. I accelerated up the hill and made it to where I could see the downward slope of the hill, and I slammed on my brakes. to my shock, the lady I saw earlier was standing right at the bottom of the small hill and in the middle of the road. She was dressed in all white bedtime clothing and had an even more disturbing look on her face than she did the last time. She still had that lifeless face, but she was not frowning. I put my car in park, rolled down my window and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" There was a brief pause of silence for a few seconds. She just continued to stare at me. Then out of nowhere, she reaches into her left side pocket and throws an object in the direction of my window. I duck down, fearing it's a rock about to smash right through the glass. I hear a loud thud, but it's not the thud of a rock or hard object that could break glass. I look up, and to my horror, I see the head of a squirrel laying on top of my windshield wipers. I yell, "What the fuck, lady?" I quickly roll up my window and I see her now sprinting full speed towards my car. She makes it to the driver's side door and begins trying to open the door while banging on the glass. I get a closer look at her while turning my gear back to drive. Her clothes were filled with blood stains, and she had scars and cuts all over her arms. I floored it in the direction of my house, looking back to see her throw one last unknown object in my direction. I'll never know what that object was, but that was the last thing on my mind. I made it home and called the police. I didn't go back to the scene to see if they had found and arrested her, but about 2 hours later I got a visit from the police. They told me they found her on the side of the road where she had previously been, just sitting in the grass with no expression. Turns out she had been in some mental institution for 5 years over in Tennessee and had been released 6 months prior. The police told me they took her into custody and searched her home. They found something disturbing. Decapitated squirrels, chipmunks, and snakes scattered all throughout her house. The husky was in a cage unharmed though, thankfully. I'm glad she didn't harm any actual person, but I still feel for those animals. I hope she gets the treatment she needs, and that I never see her again. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. And if you would like to gain early access, as well as some other cool perks, make sure you go check out my Patreon page. It's a cool way for you guys to help support the channel as well as get some cool perks. So the story with the lady found in the road that was throwing animal heads at people. Crazily enough, I have a story somewhat similar. I mean, no one was throwing anything, but it's just as creepy and disturbing. I had a lot of family that lived in Willits, California. One of my family members was dating a guy, and they ended up having a dog named Chipper. This dog was actually really cool. And they ended up breaking up, and then the dog went with the dude. The dude wasn't the brightest, so he took Chipper on a walk one day and a stranger comes up and said that that was his dog. For some reason, dude gives Chipper to the stranger to avoid confrontation. And that was the last time Chipper was seen alive. Not long after, my family member actually turned the information over to the police, and the police went and confronted the guy. They searched his house and they actually found that he had skinned the dog, as well as some other animals. I think they found kittens and other animal skins under his bed. So just keep in mind that the world is a crazy place. I'll catch you guys in the next video, and just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.